Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. Before I begin on the stories, I just wanted to mention, if you have your own personal scary story that you would like to send me for me to possibly narrate here on the channel, you can do so by sending it to southerncannibal.com. So if you have a personal true scary story that you'd like to share, please consider sending it my way. Now that all that's out of the way, let's begin. The story begins with my husband, me, and my husband's friend, who all wanted to go on a beach trip together, so we can all split it and it would be cheaper that way. We ended up going to the world's famous beach. If you haven't heard of this beach, it's in Daytona, Florida, famous for being able to drive on the beaches. The hotel we stayed at was beautiful, with outdoor chandeliers and only valet parking, which was surprising since we didn't pay much, until we realized we went around hurricane season. The valet parking was cool, but it seemed like it took a really long time, where the cars were always at the entrance. I want you to remember this later in the story. Well, we finally get unpacked and get into our bathing suits and ready to hit the beach. We had such a good time boogie boarding, laying out on the beach, and even doing some reading. Every day the waves kept getting bigger and bigger. I'm a small 24-year-old petite 5'1" female, so on about the third day, the waves were really big from the week before the storms, and I ended up rolling in one of the waves. When I got up, I had an urge to fill my ear, and I realized in the wave that it just took me out. I lost an earring. I told my husband and his friend I was going back to the room to change and go to the store right next door, because I was really afraid my piercing would close up if I didn't have anything in it for too long. When I was walking, I kept seeing a brand new white Jeep driving back and forth beside me on the main strip. I figured they were just looking for their hotel and continued walking, since again, it was right next door to our fancy hotel. I get to the store and buy my new starfish earrings. As I'm going back to the hotel, I notice the Jeep again, and at this point, I became extra aware of it. When I get to the front of the hotel, the Jeep pulls right in front of me, now blocking me from continuing. This 20-something man rolls down his window and is mouthing something that I can't understand, because from the sounds of it, he has a strong Jamaican accent. I notice that he has a lot of gold chains around him, and he was really nicely dressed. I figured then he might be asking for directions since he looks so well put together, so I try to listen harder. I finally realize that he's asking me if I'm hungry. I get a puzzled look and say no, as I then think to myself, I definitely don't look homeless, do I? I then realize that I was so close to his car I could touch it. I start to back away, as I then start getting a really bad feeling. As I was backing away, the man's door opens, and then he mouths, "No, just as friends," as he grabs my arm and then pulls me in. I begin to scream, realizing this whole time that we've been staying at this glamorous hotel and the valet going non-stop. There's nobody there in the broad daylight, and I was going to get kidnapped. I finally snap out of it and bite his hand. He lets me go and I run fast into the lobby, but I turn around to see his plates, and I see that it's a rental, and I then hear the Jeep speed off. I'm absolutely crying at this point, and still nobody in sight. I just keep running inside the hotel, until I notice I dropped my key card. I had to go back very shaken up and distraught, but I felt some relief when I saw my card on the ground, and then picked it up. When I get back to the room, I'm bawling to my husband, who's in the back of the room, asking me why my mouth is bleeding. I was so distraught that I didn't realize how hard I bit the man. I ran into the bathroom and washed my face like 20 times. After calming down, I told my husband and his friend the whole story. My husband said we should go downstairs and tell the hotel, but I was so shaken up that I didn't want to do anything else but just cry on the bed. To this day, I really regret not doing as my husband said, as I could have potentially stopped the man from kidnapping someone else. I have seen lots of sex trafficking articles in that area from overseas, who come there and take girls and ship them far, far away to do God knows what with them, never to be heard from again. This truly was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Please stay safe out there, even in the broad daylight. My name's Jamie. I'm 17 years old and I live in the northern part of Virginia. I'd just like to preface this by saying, right after this happened, I learned that my area is a hub for human trafficking. So I usually walk to and home from school since my family can't afford a fourth car and my parents and sisters use the 3. Well, about a week and a half ago, I was headed my usual way back to the house with one headphone in and the other out, just to listen in case something happens. And thank God for that. After I walked about the halfway, I noticed that a car was following me. I don't care much about cars, being the 17-year-old girl that I am, so I couldn't point out what kind, but it was a boxy-looking car and had a gray color. I noticed it because someone was honking at it because it was driving under the speed limit. Now I realized that it was watching me. As I approached my neighborhood, I realized that if this person continued to follow me and saw where I live, they might try to do something to me and my family. I started walking in and out of the cul-de-sac in my neighborhood, trying to lose this person, looking as unsuspecting as I possibly could. But then they would just drive around my neighborhood, since it's a big circle, and they would end up right behind me yet again. At this point, I'm terrified, because my parents were really big on stranger danger. My mom grew up in LA, so she's had some experiences with creeps. I decide to cut through some backyards while they're making a way around the loop, hoping that they'll see that I'm gone and just give up. I finally reached my house and then immediately told my dad. I didn't even realize how much I was shaking until I was trying to tell him what had just happened, and I couldn't even get a single word out. I wanted to call the police, but I also knew that I didn't have much of a description for them since I didn't even check the plate. Well, fast forward 2 days later, when I was getting ready to walk to school. That's when I saw it. The car was parked right across the street from my house. I couldn't even see if there was anyone in it because the windows in the car were really tinted. I didn't even know what to do. I was so frustrated and terrified. Then, I did something really stupid. I walked over to the car on the driver's side, and sure enough, there was someone sitting in there. I knocked on the window, and they then rolled it down so that I could only see like half of their face, although I could tell it was a grown man, probably in his 40s. I asked him if he had been following me a few days prior, trying to sound stern, but it was obvious I was terrified, and he just looked at me with this creepy, emotionless expression that I've never seen on anyone. It's like his eyes were looking right through me. Then he said something that shook me to my core.
"You're gonna be late for school. You should get going."
I was confused and very, very uncomfortable with the way he avoided my question. I sped walk down the driveway back to my house, and I felt like I was going to vomit. The worst part about it is that I didn't even tell my dad that I saw him parked there, or even worse, went up to him. I wanted to tell him so badly, but I knew I'd get in so much trouble if I did. I just attended school online that day, and I told everyone I was feeling sick, which wasn't very far from the truth. I mean, I did feel really sick to my stomach for the rest of that week. I have to go back to school Monday, and honestly, I'm not even sure I'll be able to walk the entire way without passing out of fear. Plenty of the girls in my area have been talked to by really sketchy guys who really look like they were trying to traffic them. And even I've had my own experiences. But this was totally different than anything else I've ever experienced before. I'm not sure if I'm just going to switch to online schooling instead, because I'm just so scared of seeing that car again. Please stay safe out there, everyone, and do not do what I did. Just call the police. The story happened a few years ago when my son was 4. He was always a very friendly child who would try and go up to everyone and say hello. I've had the talk with him about strangers on many occasions, but in his mind, he didn't know what bad people were. He was so innocent. Well, I just got off work and I picked up my son from daycare, and I then went home to do some housework. I had to do laundry so bad, and because of work, I was way behind. At this time, I didn't have a car, so we pretty much walked everywhere or took a bus. The laundromat was about a 15-minute walk away from our home, so I put my son in the wagon along with a bag of clothes to wash. While we were at the laundromat, my 4-year-old child is running everywhere. He had so much energy at that age, and I had just worked a 12-hour shift and I hadn't slept yet, and I was just so tired. There were only 3 people there. Then, I had noticed that there were a couple who I'm assuming were Russian because I could hear them speaking to each other. They seemed really nice at first. My son climbed into the laundry cart when I was pulling clothes from the washer to the dryer. Before I had a chance to grab him, this man comes over, picks up my son, and then says,
"Oh no, little one. That's not safe."
I said thank you, as I then grabbed my son, sat him on the chair, and then scolded him to stay put, as I started to get this really weird feeling like something's just off. I figured maybe it was just me being overprotective, but I would never just grab someone's kid. As I go back to moving the clothes to the dryer, the man asked my son if he wants a cookie and told him to come here. My son, as innocent as he is, started to walk over until I grabbed his hand and I told him to sit down and I would get him his own snacks. I told the man he's okay, but thank you though. I noticed the couple whispering and they just kept glancing at my child. All of a sudden, I just had this overwhelming feeling that I really needed to leave and do it fast. I grabbed my soaking wet clothes and threw them in a bag, and I pretended to get a call. I remember pretending to say, "Oh yeah, my dad's next door. He's patrolling the neighborhood, and he wanted to see his grandson and show him his cop car. I wanted them to think cops were nearby." I grabbed my son and this heavy bag of soaking wet clothes and walked out. As soon as I got out, I ran towing this wagon with one hand and carrying my child with the other as I just ran as fast as I could. I made it to the corner by my house, now thinking, okay, we're okay now. My son now crying, not understanding why I'm so freaked out. All of a sudden, a white van passes by me. I glance, and it's the couple. I wanted to throw up. I made it home and I locked my door. A couple of days go by and I'm watching the news. An alert on the news about a Russian couple, a man and a woman, who've been spotted on the playgrounds trying to get kids to come up to a white van, came on my TV. My heart almost exploded. It was stated that they were seeking out blonde-haired, blue-eyed boys and girls, and many parents alerted the cops. I then called the police to tell them what happened so that they knew these people were also in my town as well. Unfortunately, they were never caught, but rumors have it that they were a part of a sex trafficking ring. And to think, if I wasn't paying attention or listening to my gut feeling that day, what could have happened to my innocent little boy? He's about to turn 10 now, and he absolutely knows now to stay away from strangers. To all the parents out there, always watch your child and listen to your instincts. This is a really sick world we live in. I'm a 22-year-old girl. I'm gonna try to make this as short as possible, as this still really bothers me. I live in Oregon, one of the smaller cities that dot the I-5. If you don't know, the I-5 is the highway that goes from Canada to Mexico. And ever since I was a child, I've always heard the stories of kidnapping and sex trafficking occurring in mine and the surrounding towns due to it. A few years ago, I had started to work at my local Little Caesars. The Little Caesars I started at was part of a collection of small stores that all connect, which included a frozen yogurt shop, a game store and a job center, and furthest away from the parking lot, the Little Caesars that I started to work at. The parking was the same for all the employees of all the shops. Behind the frozen yogurt shop was a small dirt slope which you'd walk for about 30 steps before you can then walk up a set of small concrete stairs that then lead you to a makeshift parking space. This was all fine during the time I would arrive to work, as it was still day out. But after some time, the boss had me start doing the closing shift. For some reason, in this parking space, there was absolutely no street lights, and when nighttime struck that area, it would become completely pitch black. This bothered me a bit, but I worked with a majority of other girls, and none of them ever complained about the parking, so I just brushed my initial worry away. Fast forward maybe a month into my night shifts, and one day I just felt ill, so I asked my supervisor if I could clock off early as in 11 p.m. versus 12 p.m. She agreed, so I got my things and exited outside. I started walking, shooting a text to my boyfriend. As I walked past the job center, I had passed a man who was standing outside of the job center. As I walked past him, I had turned the corner of the sidewalk in front of the GameStop, and I noticed that he began to walk too. And well, this was concerning. I had been doing this shift for some time now, and I'd never seen a person standing outside this late. Now, Little Caesars was the last of the building's collection of shops to close. And as I kept walking, at this point I was almost to the end of the yogurt store now, and I realized something. Everything past this point was completely dark, and my car was a good 20-second jog away. Every horror movie scene with a man and a woman in a dark alley popped into my head at that time, and I then did something that I would never normally do. I turned around to this guy, suddenly to the man that has been walking behind me. It's almost funny, but I had straight up asked him, "Hey, where are you going?" He then stared at me for a split moment, and then replied in a fast pace that he's looking for a bathroom. I didn't think about how weird that response was, but it was weird enough amongst everything to then tell him, "There's no bathrooms up this way." And in an almost jerky way, he told me,
"Oh, okay, thanks,"
and then gives me scary laughs. But he then turned around and walked the other way. After watching him walk past the job center, I turned around and ran to my car. I didn't tell anyone after it happened because I didn't want anyone to worry. But after I got fired from that Little Caesars, I then told my boyfriend what happened. He undoubtedly was really disturbed, and he kind of expressed how extra weird his reaction was to what he was looking for, being a restroom, as he walked past every store which would have had one. But it was 11 p.m., so they were probably all closed anyways. A part of me still does hope maybe he really was looking for a bathroom. But so far, all the people I've told this story to don't think so. When I was 16 years old, my family fell on hard times, so we had to move from a relatively safe middle-class neighborhood back to a rundown crime-infested one in the inner city. Literally our first day there, the neighbors ran some kids out of their house and started shooting at them. To clarify, I'm a female, and it was pretty common for me to get a lot of unwanted male attention at that time. But in this area, that was amplified. I was always so scared to walk from school, so I usually bundled up even in the hot weather, making sure to wear conservative clothing that covered me up really well. Usually a hoodie and some jeans, with my backpack strapped in front of me. One day, while walking home from school, a beat-up van pulled up next to me. I don't remember the color of it, just that it looked like it came straight out of a junkyard. Because I was fairly close to home, I wasn't too alarmed at first. A much older man, about in his 50s, rolled down his window and then whistled at me to come here. I ignored him and continued walking, clutching my fist in my hoodie pocket, pretending to be holding some kind of weapon.
"Hey baby, why don't you come talk to me?"
he said, still rolling slowly forward, following me. Because I was so close to home and I didn't want him to know where I lived, I suddenly stopped dead in my tracks. I didn't know what I should do next, where to go. I started thinking that at any time, a different person could swing that side door open and then pull me inside. I turned and looked in the man in the eyes for the first time, getting a better look at his face. He looked thin and dirty, but his eyes opened wildly large, like a carnivore stalking its prey. Unfortunately, I had seen that look before, so I wasn't totally freaking out this time. I wouldn't say that I'm the toughest girl, but I'd been through enough in my life to have some sort of backbone in this situation. I come from a large family, with many brothers who are well known on that side of the city, so I don't know if the reason that he suddenly began to apologize profusely was because he perhaps recognized me, because all of my siblings looked so much alike, including me, or because no one had ever turned to look directly at him before, and he was surprised. I waited until he drove away to continue my journey home. It sounds like everything turned out well, but this isn't where the story ends. On another day, after finishing up a school project with my best friend, we went our separate ways. I had to take a bus a few blocks and then walk another 3 blocks off the main road to get home. While walking through the second block, a wide SUV then pulled over to the opposite side of the road, honking at me. The SUV was nice with deeply tinted windows, and it looked like something one of my brothers would drive, so stupidly, I smiled and waved, but ultimately continued my walk home because I wasn't sure who was in the vehicle. But the SUV continued to honk at me, until suddenly the driver's window rolled down to reveal a familiar-looking face, gesturing me to come over. It was that same man from the junkyard van. My heart dropped. I had spotted a small convenience store and slipped inside, looking out the windows through all of the flyers plastered all over them. Ironically, a few of those flyers on the windows were of missing girls. When I saw the van pull around to the other side of the road, I moved to the back of the store, making sure to look behind me through the orb-shaped mirrors hanging from the ceiling. I didn't have a phone, so I thought about asking the store clerk to borrow his, but at this point, I had absolutely no trust in men. I waited for a while, pretending to browse the shelves, until I was absolutely certain the man in the SUV was gone now. I know this story might not sound all that terrible, but when you're living in the moment of someone actively chasing you, fearing what will come next, and all the bad things that could happen to you, and never seeing your family again, that is one of the greatest fears you could face. I'm so glad I followed my intuition, but please, talk to your children about stranger danger and ways to avoid being kidnapped. And to the man from the junkyard van and the nice SUV, for your sake, I really hope that we don't encounter each other again. Also, fuck you for preying on a child.